Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Fractional Talent Tech Talks. The Fractional Talent Network is a community of senior technology and business experts who collaborate to leverage their collective strengths to provide innovative and effective solutions to our clients' challenges. We connect companies to top talent through flexible advisory and project-based services, helping them design, adapt, integrate, upgrade, and automate technology to enhance business operations, drive growth, scale efficiently, increase profitability, and leverage AI for workflow automation. We're excited to introduce our Tech Talk series, a set of short, insightful sessions on industry relevant topics. Today's Tech Talk, from cloud chaos to clarity, building a cloud smart strategy that scales, with our FTN experts, Rami Khan and Paul Zeila from our cloud optimization practice. Now let's get started.
Thanks, Kate. I appreciate it. Let's be honest. Most cloud journeys don't start with a strategy. They start with a credit card, and that's fine at the beginning. But over time, it leads to confusion, growing costs, disorganized tools, and no clear owner. I've been in rooms where the CIO didn't know how many cloud subscriptions were active until the finance team flagged runaway spending. It is more common than you think. At Fractional Technology Network, Rami and I help leaders turn chaos into clarity. We don't just advise, we roll up our sleeves and take action. We've helped financial institutions migrate key systems like digital banking and CRM into the cloud while aligning with governance, security, and cost targets. We've also helped nonprofits modernize their infrastructure without blowing the budget or derailing daily operations. We provide real-world cloud assessments, strategy resets, and direct execution support, and we do it as senior partners and not as an army of consultants. This session is about helping you clearly think about where you are, what you need, and what it takes to scale with purpose. Today, I believe most businesses are just scratching the surface of what the cloud can do. But without clarity, strategy, and ownership, it becomes a liability instead of an advantage. So how do you go from scattered tools and rising costs to something structured, secure, and scalable? That's where cloud discipline comes in, and Rami has spent years guiding organizations through that exact shift. He will walk us through what a real strategy looks like and the foundational decisions that need to be made early on to get it right. Rami, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here. So I think what you pointed out is correct in that a lot of companies don't really think about their cloud strategy up front, right? And what we mean here by strategy is not just a piece of paper or just empty promises or made up projections. What we're really talking about is the fact that if you want to fully leverage the power of cloud, what you need to first look at is the big picture, right? You must be able to answer questions like why you even want to put workloads in the cloud. So what capabilities you need in place to manage risks and what operational controls you should implement to make sure your costs and from a security perspective, even your attack surfaces are managed properly, right? So these would, I think, naturally lead into some other decisions you may have to make, such as managing your compliance or regulatory impacts. You might have to evaluate your strategic fit for the cloud solutions you're considering, and probably, I would say most importantly, actually, ensuring that you have proper governance over cloud usage. Because without a governance process, cloud sprawl creeps in quietly, right? And we'll talk here in a minute what governance really means. But in effect, if you don't do that, you're gonna notice that you might have 5 tools doing pretty much the same thing, or in the cloud, or you might have unused services that are just racking up costs, right? You could even have, from a people perspective, pockets of knowledge within the organization that are not complementing each other. And that can create some redundancies, that can create other risks that go unmitigated. So all of this, I think, Paul, is even more critical now than ever, because if you want to leverage AI in the cloud, because I would say cloud has made AI so much more accessible to organizations. But if you don't manage some of these strategic risks up front and as you go along, you will probably also struggle with putting the right guardrails for AI usage as well. So maybe, Paul, you can talk a little bit to us about how do you even start planning for your cloud usage?
Thanks, Rami. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I've seen cloud investments that were technically flawless, but didn't improve the business. The problem is that they were not aligned with real business goals. So let me give you an example. In one institution I worked with, the technology team successfully moved multiple platforms to the cloud, but the customer satisfaction scores and operational metrics didn't budge. Why was that? Because they didn't tie the move to a business driver. IT and business need to be partners. The left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing. In this case, they optimized the technology, but didn't solve the actual pain. Rami and I start every engagement by listening. Where are you at today? Why are you in the cloud? Or why do you want to be in the cloud? Is it performance, speed to market, vendor lock-in, or just compliance? We guide organizations through those conversations and link cloud planning to real outcomes: member experience, operational cost control, faster delivery cycles, and improved resilience. We speak business and technology fluently, so when we help build your roadmap, it resonates across the boardroom, into IT, into the business, and to customers and members. And that brings us to how we structure that clarity with 3 pillars of cloud smart strategy. So I'm going to hand it off to Rami, who will kick us off with governance.
That's right. So we can dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics we've touched on, right? So let me cover the first, what we're calling our 3-pillar strategy for cloud. So the first pillar we want to make sure is there is the governance piece. So the way I think about governance in the context of cloud, or really any technology for that matter, is really about 3 things in my mind. Number one, you got to align your activities and your decisions with the broader business context or technology drivers. So you have to be clear about your goals. For example, are you adopting cloud for potential cost savings, or even better cost transparency? Are you putting workloads in the cloud because you just need to be nimble and maybe need to rapidly scale up and down? Or maybe you just decided as a business that technology is just not your core expertise, right? You want your resources focused on other things. So this is kind of the first pillar, is aligning with your business objective. But then you have to align your roles and responsibilities in the organization to be able to really manage cloud properly. So, at a high level, this starts with what we call the shared responsibility model, where you need to know what you expect from the cloud vendor versus your internal teams. But even within your organization, you need to be clear about responsibilities, right? So from a risk perspective, this is really important, not just to minimize waste, but also to maximize the value from cloud. And I believe it's very important to keep in mind something we call in security and control space segregation of duties principle, right? So this is something that uh, folks in internal controls or finance and accounting are very familiar with. But in the context of cloud, you have to think about questions like, do you want, for example, your developers having direct access into production environments, right? Um, do you have your proper testing and staging environment set up so that you can validate any upgrades or patches in your lower environments before you bring them to production? You have the maker checker responsibilities defined, because some of the biggest risks with cloud originate from misconfigurations, right? So I saw something like 93% of the cloud breaches can be attributed to really client responsibilities in terms of misconfigurations and human errors. But there's no one size fits all, right? Recent client we were working with, I when I discussed with them the developer access to production, their reason was, we're a small team. We have developers doing other functions too. Now that may be okay. We can put in other mitigating controls. So you really have to just look at it again back to the business context, and then in this case, we made sure the access was not overly permissive, and the things that the developers needed to do in the production environment, they could do it in a safe way. So back to governance, we talked about aligning with business objectives. We talked about roles and responsibilities. And then the third thing I want to touch on is really monitoring your activities and building the intelligence from that data, which I think is really key here. Because if you do this right, really creates a feedback loop in that what you learn from your monitoring and reporting should inform your planning and then ultimately allocation of resources going forward. So from a technology perspective, are your people deploying and shutting down resources with accountability? Are you logging your events so that you can respond to incidents in an appropriate manner? Um, and so in my case, I recently worked with an organization that was using the Microsoft suite of products. And as we know, with the M365 suite, you get a lot of things bundled, and they had logging and alerting enabled everywhere. But what they were not taking, they were really not taking follow-up actions, right, to mitigate the risks. So you have to consider all that for your cloud strategy. Now, with that said, that's the first pillar is the governance, and the second one, Paul, we defined as architecture. So maybe you can walk us a little bit through what that means and what organizations should be thinking about in terms of that.
Sure, absolutely. So architecture. This is where really a lot of the cloud strategies quietly fall apart. And organizations need to ask themselves, are you cloud native? Are you hybrid? Or are you somewhere in between? Can your environment scale without rebuilding everything? These seem like technical questions, but carry profound operational and regulatory compliances. I've worked with organizations that moved to the cloud for speed, only to realize several months later that their legacy authentication system couldn't support applications across multi-region workloads, or in other words, multiple geographic locations or multiple locations of their data centers. Or were still tied to on-prem reporting tools that broke compliance when connected to public cloud storage. And in one case, a financial institution's cloud deployment introduced risk by bypassing key change controls that had been well governed in their on-prem environment. So they took a step back. Architecture is where good intentions meet complex reality. Conflicts between old and new systems, restrictions based on legacy, licensing, and risk introduced by clear data or unclear data ownership or undiscovered integrations. We help clients take a step back and ask the right questions. Are your systems truly interoperable, or are hidden dependencies holding you back? Are you building with scalability in mind, or just lifting and shifting legacy technology into a new hosting environment? Are your closed vendors aligned? Are your cloud vendors aligned with your compliance, privacy, and uptime requirements? Or are they introducing risk under the radar? Architecture isn't just AWS or Azure. It's about designing something resilient enough to scale with your business, but structured sufficiently to satisfy your auditors. With that foundation in place, the next challenge is to stay on top of what's happening before you get the first invoice. I'm going to hand it back to Rami to walk through how we help clients build visibility and control in their cloud environments in real time. Rami?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Paul. So yeah, visibility, especially in terms of costs, is extremely important, right? So if you're waiting for your invoice to show up to understand your cloud spend, it's really too late, right? What we do is we help clients get real-time dashboards, alerts, and forecasting in place. So this is relatively straightforward for SaaS in most cases, but for other service layers, I believe the key here is really to build in the right controls so you can monitor these costs against your objectives and you're not surprised later on. So this ties back to some of what I was saying earlier about governance and tying back to your business objectives. For example, you may want to track your costs by your infrastructure components, or you may want to tie it back to the business service that these components support, or maybe you want to report based on business units, right? So it's really it's not one size fits all. But one thing I would mention from a cloud perspective, AWS or Azure, you could create separate orgs, for example, in AWS based on what you're trying to accomplish. You could have a tagging strategy early on so that when your resources are getting spun up, you have the right resource, tags in there in the metadata so that you can analyze that information for your business intelligence. So with that said, with the three pillars covered, Paul, we covered governance and architecture and visibility. Maybe let me jump to now scalability, because we talked about planning and then really architecting your strategy or building your strategy. But then operationally, you have to scale that as well. So the important thing here is that you don't want your cloud resources to just scale out of control, and you don't want to end up with the tech debt based on that, right? So it's a broad topic, but one I would say I'll give a couple of strategies that I think are very impactful. Number one is just using infrastructure as cloud. So that's a big lever you can pull, where you manage your cloud infrastructure using infrastructure as code. Now that what that allows you to do is have a lot of the discipline that generally is there with software development. You can apply that in infrastructure as well. You can manage versions, you can check for errors, and protect your artifacts from tampering. So even before you deploy your environment, you can find the misconfigurations and resolve them, right? The other thing I would say is just the observability. So in this case, observability, what it is really ability to understand the internal state of a system by observing the outputs, right? So for example, in cloud native applications, or even microservices or containers, or even serverless architectures, these are very complex distributed systems, and really you require good practices and discipline to make sure that you have the reliability and performance built into these. So finally, what I would say real quick is, when you're thinking about scaling, you have to think about your teams as well, because you can't scale your systems without thinking about your human resources. And what works for smaller teams, maybe one person wearing multiple hats, or one person that's a jack of all trades, that probably wouldn't work for more complex systems. So with all that said, Paul, we've covered a lot of ground. Maybe you can talk a little bit about who even owns the strategy, right? So we talked about all that good stuff we're supposed to do, but how do you see organizations leading the charge in terms of strategy?
Yeah, Rami, thanks. That to me is one of the most significant gaps in any organization, that no one wants to own or no one owns the complete cloud strategy, whether it causes confusion because of understanding, or worse, it could live entirely in IT. And that might seem logical to the organization, but it's really can be a pretty significant problem. You have to remember, like any other technology project, cloud strategy and cloud implementation isn't just an IT initiative. It's a business platform. It impacts how a business serves customers, how quickly a business can launch products, control costs, and how resilient they are when things go sideways. When ownership is siloed, important decisions are made in a vacuum. IT might choose a technically sound solution that doesn't align with the CFO's cost controls. Or they might prioritize speed and skip over steps that compliance or legal would have flagged if they would have been in the room. I've worked with CFOs blindsided by cloud invoices tens of thousands of dollars over budget because there was no shared accountability or real-time visibility. I've seen chief operating officers frustrated because critical workflows were disrupted during a cloud migration with no cross-functional coordination and no addressing of organizational change management. Those kinds of breakdowns don't happen because the tools were bad. They happen because the ownership model was broken. That's where we come in. We help organizations move from fragmented ownership to functional alignment. Finance gets the data and structure to understand and manage ROIs. Operations has clear visibility into how cloud change affects delivery and affects operational staff. Technology just doesn't own the tools, they lead with purpose. And leadership can finally see the whole picture and feel confident that the strategy is working. We're not talking about adding more complexity or more meetings. I think we've all had enough with the meetings. We're discussing building a practical operating model where everyone knows their roles and the business stays in sync as the cloud strategy evolves. If the cloud still feels like a moving target, a side project, or an out-of-control cost, it's time to pause and regain your clarity. And that's precisely what our 90-day cloud strategy reset is designed to do. Here's how we deliver a fast, forward-focused reset without disrupting your day-to-day work. In the first few weeks, we go through a cloud discovery and a current state assessment. That includes architecture, contracts, controls, cost analysis, business needs, etc. Following that, then we start laying out the strategy roadmap and alignment to business priorities based on where you want to go. And remember what I just said, based on business priorities. That's the key piece there. And then in the last few weeks of the strategy, we look at governance and tooling and execution guidance, practical and tailored to your organization. In one recent engagement, we worked with a $2 billion managed asset bank with 3 departments running cloud pilots in isolation. They weren't even aware of overlapping tools or data. In 90 days, we gave them a single, actionable roadmap that saved them 6 figures in annual spending and drastically improved the coordination across the organization. Rami, what else is there?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it really well, Paul. What I would just add is that we do this alongside your team, right? We don't just do it above them. This is not about just building a 50-page slide deck and just for it to just collect dust. It's really a hands-on approach. We do it collaboratively, and it comes with executive level guidance from practitioners that have been in this space for decades, right?
So what we're saying too is you as an organization, you're not alone. If your cloud feels disorganized, expensive, or disconnected from the business, we're here to help. We've helped clients untangle it, we reset it, and we rebuild momentum. We're not here to replace your team. We're here to help you strengthen your team, both on the technology side, on the cloud side, as well as the business as a whole. We offer that 90-day cloud strategy review with clear steps, business alignment, and tangible ROI. There's no fluff, there's no jargon, just progress and rolling up the sleeves to get it done. So if your team is stuck or unsure how to move forward, we're ready to help. Let's reset, clarify, and scale together. Kate, back to you.
That was great, Paul and Rami. Thank you for sharing how to scale your cloud strategy following your 3 pillars that you outlined for a cloud smart strategy, right? Governance, architecture, cost, visibility. That last one I know gets a lot of people. Thank you for asking the right hard questions for cloud optimization. And also, I think that 90-day cloud strategy review is an easy first step for an organization to get started. So connect with us here at Fractional Talent to explore how we can help you clarify, simplify, reset, and optimize your cloud to be a smart strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.